Welcome to Springs in the Desert's Women at the Well Virtual Book Club. I'm Anne, here again with Kimberly and Allie. And this is the second episode in our discussion of Father Jacques Philippe's book, Searching for and Maintaining Peace. Before we get into the discussion, though, we just want to remind you that if you want to know more about the work that we do accompanying and supporting those who are struggling with infertility, you can visit us on the web at springsinthedesert.org. And of course, we want you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram so that you can join our community. So Kimberly, I'm going to turn it over to you to get our discussion started. If you would please set up part 2 of Father Philippe's book for us.
Okay, so this is the book we're talking about, Searching for and Maintaining Peace. And last week we went over part 1, which was Interior Peace, the Road to Saintliness, and just kind of talking about how important it is for us to be peaceful in order to hear God. Because when we're so agitated, a lot of times our focus is not on God, it's on our problems, our struggles, the way other people are irritating us, the decisions we have to make, all the things that cause us just to be on edge and not peaceful. So I really loved that first section, really kind of lays the groundwork for how we can just start to enter into a proper understanding of peace, which it doesn't mean that we have no problems. It's very much, and that we're just happy all the time, but that we understand ourselves as to be a daughter, a child of God, and that God is in control and that He's a loving God who has a wonderful plan for us. And it's building up our trust in God, so that no matter what happens, we can get to that place of accepting and trusting that God is in control and just trying to find that peace. So, like I said, I read this book all the time. So it's not a one-time lesson. This is something I go back to all the time. But part 2 is really a section that I go to very frequently. It's how to react to that which causes us to lose peace. So I think it's very helpful because it kind of goes through the fact that if we are putting our peace, or if we're waiting for things around us to be perfect before we can have peace, that's that we're never going to have peace, because he talks about the goods that we're looking at, material goods, money, health, power, moral nature goods, our capacities, our self-esteem, the affection of other people towards us, and even things that we want, things that we're afraid to lose, and or things that we, and the fear that we have that we're going to not have what we need. Yeah. So he talks about, these are just an extremely variable. These are so variable that if we try to make those our source of security, that we're never going to be peaceful. So anyway, that's kind of how it starts off, and it goes on to talk about many other areas where we lose peace, with struggles within ourselves and impatience with ourselves, impatience with others, our husbands perhaps.
Never.
But just, so many of the different things he goes through to talk about, where common places that we often lose our peace. So I don't know, I want to turn it to Allie. Like, what did you think of this chapter?
Yeah, I love that introduction is perfect. I think that the kind of big theme that I took away from this was just that turning over, like you've been talking about, turning over to God, trusting Him, even when we perceive that we lack something. So in our case, through infertility, maybe we lack as many biological children as we would wish for. And I was so grateful to be reminded of the idea that we first need to remember and know in our hearts that God loves us. Mm-hmm. And we start there in our prayer. And from there, we can cultivate this trust that he is providing for us. It's not like an intellectual exercise, which I think is a temptation for me sometimes. Like, oh, I can just think my way into understanding this. And it's really that prayer, that personal relationship. And I think it ties in nicely with the gospel yesterday of Thomas and his proclamation after, his need to see Christ in his wounds. He actually says, "My Lord and my God." So it's this very personal understanding of who God is and that he loves them. And I think that for all of us struggling with infertility, that's so true to just start there. And we talk about this a lot, right? Our being a daughter of God and starting from there in our ability to trust him with our lives. Do you agree with that, Anne? Is that something you can relate to?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I agree with and fully endorse the opinions expressed by both of you. They were wonderful. But I do have to say that I love everything that you all said, but this part, all of the sections in part 2 were tough for me. And I don't know how it was for you, or for those people out there who maybe just started reading this book and are getting into it. This was really hard for me. I think it gave me a lot of things that I need to work on, but it gave me a lot of hope, for all of the reasons that both of you just expressed, but it also really challenged me a lot. And that was a little bit difficult. I had to put it down a couple of times and come back to it because I was really challenged by it. And that first part, troubles of life, fear of being without, I mean, that really, I think got to the heart of this whole struggle with infertility for myself. And I just wrote down some of the specific things, he talked about: the fear of being without, of feeling threatened. I mean, I looked at that in terms of like infertility being almost this threat to my marriage or to my kind of ideal of what marriage was supposed to be for us. Apprehension about the present and future difficulties. I mean, that absolutely speaks to this experience of infertility. Fear of lacking something important. I mean, having a family is important, right? These are all good and important things. And, that fear that we have when we see that it's not coming about in the way that we had expected. And also that fear of not succeeding. He says not succeeding in such a project, in any project, in any sort of hope or dream that we had for our life. And for us, the hope and dream in our marriage of having a family. So that part, was really challenging and sort of was like a call out to me, I need to look at these things, these fears and apprehensions that might be holding me back from peace. Because in the end, this finding peace, of course, is grace, right? But it's also a choice. It's also my choice, to pursue peace, and to be, to be captivated or captured by peace, so that was a real call out to me. This is going to give me a lot to kind of think about and work through, I think, for some time. I don't know, Kimberly, what do you think? Because how many times have you read this book?
I mean, I've carried this around in my purse for years.
Right.
I can see why.
And I really feel like it has transformed the way I think about things now. And that when I lose my peace now, I may have said this last time, but I go into my bedroom, especially because I'm home all the time. But I go into
Everyone's
my bedroom.
home all the time now.
Yeah, right? It's like kind of convenient. You lose your peace. Okay. I go to my room and we have a big crucifix on the wall. And I just kneel down and I just look at Jesus and I'm like, help, and sometimes I don't even know why I've lost my peace.
Yeah.
So I go there to just ask, why, what is this stirring up in me? Why am I so anxious right now? Why am I so upset? And It's been amazing. It's been amazing because I just feel like the Lord has just been revealing. I mean, it never ends, right? I mean, I've come to peace with my infertility,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so many other things that I have to have peace with
Right.
that constantly, are coming at me. And so, but just going, and I mean, a lot of it's my own weaknesses and my failings. And I wish I were more virtuous. I wish I didn't struggle with the things I struggle with. I wish I wasn't so impatient. But this book even talks about that, this chapter talks about struggling with our own weaknesses and really just embracing them. That this is just helping me to realize my dependence on God and how often I have to just keep turning to him and turning to him and turning to him. And it's never going to end. Like the goal is not to get to the place where I don't need God anymore. Okay, I'm good. I've got this covered. It's that, the goal is to be so united with Christ. That's the goal, that I can look to him constantly for support, help, guidance, and that we're, more and more united. So that's why, I think this book is continually going to just help me in these ways.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, Allie, in our email conversation, you kind of touched on that because you were mentioning that something that really hit home with you was this idea that, you don't have to sort of be perfect before you can pursue peace. Do you want to?
Yeah, I want to read it, actually, just this one sentence. So it's in the section 8 of part 2, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And it's on page 42 and 43 is really, but I'll just read a part of it. It says that it concerns precisely the temptation to believe that in the situation which is ours, we lack something essential, and that because of this, our progress and the possibility of blossoming spiritually is denied us. And then later he says, I feel underprivileged compared to others, and I carry in me the constant nostalgia of another life, more privileged, where finally I could do things that are worthwhile. And I mean, this just hit me right, it's kind of square in the jaw, I guess you could say, because this is exactly how I experience infertility. It's this idea that I can't really live right here, right now, because I'm waiting for something. Or if I had children, then my life would be complete. Then, my marriage would be perfect. Then God could do great things in me. And that's just a lie. And so this section really helped me to recognize that, as Father Philippe said, the real life is not elsewhere. It's really right here, right now. Like God is here in this situation that I'm in right now, infertility and all. And furthermore, that I shouldn't forget to live. I think this is a real temptation for a lot of us, especially when we're going through treatments and things like that do consume so much of our time and energy and resources. It's like easy to forget to, live right now for today, in the situation that we're in, and not in these 2-week increments or in this idea of one day when ... So that's not something that I'm perfect in right yet, but it was really hopeful for me to read that and remember that's the truth, that I, right now, right here is what God wants to work in. So.
Yeah, and the idea that it really is a process, so we don't have to get to that perfect place right now where we live each day perfectly, but that it is a process, and that, God is with us. I mean, he's walking hand in hand with us through that process. That's one of the things also that I learned through this, in that section about abandonment. What do you do when you're unable to abandon yourself? The answer he gives, abandon yourself anyway. Yeah, I mean, and there are some days when I can be like, feel very spiritual and be like, oh yes, Lord, I abandoned myself to you. And then there's other days where I read that and say, well, that's a ridiculous answer, right? Like, I want the magic formula, but it is true that we just have to, I guess in a way, it's kind of like fake it till you make it. What do you think? You just have to keep saying it, right? You just have to do it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Each day, I think, has its own challenges too. Like we were talking about earlier, even with this quarantine, it's like certain days, it's easier to be at home all day. And other days, it really is difficult to not be around your community or to be able to travel or, do the things that we were used to. And, but like you said, God, it's a process and God is with us in each of those moments, whether it's a difficult day or an easier day. So.
Right. Yeah, the section that's really well worn in my book is the faults and shortcomings of others.
Kimberly, why don't you elaborate on that a little bit? Or as much as you're able to without getting in trouble.
Well, it says, how to be patient towards others. And, when you're home in close quarters, it's really easy in marriage to see you see the faults of your spouse. And I mean, this is so good. Like, when I first got married and I suddenly saw that my husband actually had faults, which I did not, I didn't see before I got married. It was very troubling to me. And I don't know why I was not prepared for that. But now, 12, 13 years into my marriage, I'm beginning to see that how beautiful it is that we are learning to love each other in our weaknesses. And the more I'm able to accept my own weaknesses, the more I'm able to accept my husband's weaknesses. I mean, how crazy to think that, I get a pass when I mess up, but he's held to this higher standard and is not allowed to make mistakes. And that's insane. So I feel like it has helped me so much through that frustration I've had to be able to become more patient with him, more patient with myself. It says here, one of the things in section number 12, it says patience towards others. When we are powerless, let us be quiet and let God act. And that is like not my natural inclination to be quiet. And so I've been learning to do that, and it helps me so much if I can just be quiet, allow God to act, and also not feel like I have to point out every fault that another person has, my husband. But I don't have to point that out. Like, I can just pray and let God sometimes show him and deal with him what he needs to do. And it doesn't have to be me saying, hey, I think maybe you should work on this, So anyway, I don't know. Have you guys found any?
Yeah, and I think also that goes with our own kind of self-talk,
Yes.
where we can sort of beat ourselves up, especially, again, when we're looking at this struggle with infertility, we can really, our own self-talk can really beat us up. So I think sometimes we have to be quiet and still with ourselves too, and, give ourselves always room for growth, but, to kind of give ourselves a break and, and like you said, to allow God to act within us. I have to tell you that this is great, but time flies when you're having fun. So we only have about 5 minutes left in this episode. So I want to turn it over to each of you to just give some final thoughts and maybe kind of a little takeaway as we close out part 2 of Father Philippe's book. So who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. So I think what I'm going to take away from this, I'll just start with what I thought was the most important reminder for me, which is prayer. And Kimberly, you both spoke about it, but coming back to prayer in those little moments throughout our days when we're agitated, when we're upset with whoever, whatever situation, but also just that deeper intimacy with God that we all need in order to be able to do this, to even start the process, is just to remember how much we're loved. So I always need that reminder. And, and he even talks about how when we do make mistakes, sometimes our inclination is to abandon our prayer, but that's actually the last thing we should do. Like, we need to come back. So I would say that that's my greatest takeaway. And then also just to live right now in the life that I've been given today, and to check myself, come back to prayer, come back to God's love when I'm tempted to say, oh, one day when ... then things will make sense. So those are my two.
Thank
No,
you.
that's great. No, I mean, I like also when he talks about the unrest we have often when we have decisions to make. So I think for me, being kind of a little bit of a type A control person, want to have everything figured out, and just feeling so out of control with infertility, and not knowing what to do. I think that section is really helpful, because just to realize that we should not be anxious over the decisions that we have to make. And it actually, how much anxiety impedes us being able to really make a good decision, that we need to be able to turn it to God, to realize that if we are trying to have his guidance and we don't clearly know exactly what he wants, it's okay to start moving in a direction as long as we know that it's not morally opposed to his will. It's okay to start moving in a direction and see what happens. And I mean, that's what we have done in our walk, is just sort of walk out, make a step, with foster care classes. Well, we'll just start, we'll just walk out this way. We don't know if this is going to work for us. We don't know if, but we just started moving in that direction and sort of seeing what happened and allowing God the space to move. So that's, been really, that was really helpful for me.
Yeah.
What about you?
That's great. Yeah. My takeaway, I think, comes from number 2, our difficulty believing in providence. And Father Philippe says we cannot experience this support from God unless we leave him the necessary space in which he can express himself. So back to everything that you both said about that prayer and that reliance on God and abandonment to him. But I also see that is necessary in our friendships and community. And so I think that we all need to have a place, we all need that support and that friendship to allow God to act within us also, because this walk through infertility can be so lonely and so isolating. And so for me, it's, the necessity of strengthening that bond with my husband and strengthening it not on our own, but through God's help and prayer. And then also, strengthening my friendships and community and having that support around me, not shutting people out, which can be a real temptation because you feel like an outsider, but seeking and finding community. And of course, that's a great place to remind everyone that Springs in the Desert really wants to be a source of community for you and a place for you to come to be with other people who are walking the same path as you. So we're really here to have support and solidarity and to accompany you. This was a great discussion. We could have gone on for a long time, especially you, Kimberly, because you have this book memorized backward and forward. But I think we're going to come back again one more time to discuss the third part of Father Philippe's book. So we hope that everyone comes back and joins us again. Remember that you can find us at springsinthedesert.org. And please follow us on Facebook and Instagram and join our community. Thanks, ladies. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. All right. Bye.
Bye.